Hi everyone, my name is Shalhevet Schwartz, and this is Gefet on Daf Yomi, a joint project of Hadra and Yeshivat Drisha. Today's Daf Lamed Tet. We are deep into Masechet Zevachim, and the topic that we're going to be discussing today um, is the role that of leftovers in the Beit HaMikdash, right? The role of leftover blood, um, which, as we'll see, is supposed to be poured onto the yesod of the mizbeach, right? The blood that was not put on the mizbeach via haza'ah or netina. It gets poured onto the mizbeach, and the question that we're going to be dealing with is really what's behind that action? What's the meaning of that action? What role does this kind of leftover blood have in the avodah kapara process? Is it just leftovers or is it something else? So let's dive in. All right. Our daf Masechet Zevachim daf Lamed Tet Bet brings a midrash halacha on some the psukim in Vayikra Perek Daled that discuss chataot hapnimiyot, a couple of particular chataot that whose blood is where the avodah actually happens right inside on the mizbeach hapnimi, not the mizbeach hachitzon. So v'chiper, right? Quoting the pasuk v'chiper afal pi shelo samach v'nislach afal pi shelo natan shirayim. So the Braita here is coming to darshan these two words v'chiper and v'samach, and to say that what those words come to teach us is that certain actions, certain parts of the process are not actually ma'akiv. The korban can atone for you even if you didn't do, right, on the one hand smicha afal pi shelo samach, and on the other hand netina of shirayim, which is to say the pouring the leftover blood on the mizbeach. Then the Braita following up on this asks, Umara ita lifsol behazaot ulachshir b'smicha shirayim. So there are a number of pilot there are a number of different actions that we're going to see in the psukim. Right, there are going to be four actions associated with this korban. One of which is haza'ah, right, the sprinkling of the blood on the mizbeach. So why is it that the haza'ah is me'akev, which is to say, if you didn't do it, then the whole korban is pasul. Whereas with smichat and shirayim, those, even if you didn't do it, the korban is okay. Amart posel b'hazaot she'me'akvot b'chol makom u'machshir ani b'smicha v'shirayim she'en me'akvot b'chol makom. So the Braita basically compares it to other kinds of korbanot, right? The other chataot. Right, in other cases, right, haza'ah is always me'akevet, whereas both the smicha and the shirayim are not me'akevet in other places. So, right, let's just take a quick look at the psukim in Vayikra just to understand a little bit more about what we're talking about. So again, this Braita is referring to the chataot hapnimiyot, which I believe there are several, right? One of them is the chatat of the Kohen Mashiach, who is shogeg. One of them is the chatat of Yom Kippurim, right? That the Kohen Gadol brings on Yom Kippur. There also the chatat, right? The dam is sprinkled on the mizbeach hapnimi, right inside, also on the parochet. And the example here, right? The psukim here are from the Har Ha'elim Davar Shel Tzibur, so a korban chatat that is brought when the entire tzibur sins. So let's just look at the psukim real quick. Right, in Kol Adat Yisrael Yishgu, the first pasuk here describes the sin, right? And then you bring a parban bakar l'chatat v'ivioto, at the end of that first pasuk there v'havioto lifnei olam moed, and then see number one bold, right? What's the first action that happens? V'samchu ziknei ha'idat yideihem al rosh hapar lifnei Hashem. So the zakenim do smicha on the korban, right? They put their hands and their weight on the korban. That's number one. Right, obviously, the shechita is part of the process. Behivia kohen, right? What's the second action that has to do with the dam here, right? V'tavala kohen es ba'omin adam v'hizashav ha'pamim lifnei Hashem et pnei ha'parochet u'min hadam yitina kohen mizbeach. So what happens to the dam? There's haza'ah on the parochet, and then there's netina on the mizbeach. Again, we're talking about the mizbeach hapnimi. The mizbeach is a hav here. Right, as we know, because it says there, Asher lifnei Hashem, Asher ba'olam moed. The mizbeach that's in the olam moed is the mizbeach hapnimi. That's action number two. So action number one is the smicha, right? Obviously, there's shchita. Then we get haza'ah / netina of the dam, on the mizbeach hapnimi. Number three, that kol hadam yishafech al yisod mizbeach ha'olah. So then what happens? We pour out the remaining blood onto the mizbeach ha'olah, which is petach olam moed, which is to say the the outer mizbech. Um, then et kol chaboyari mimenu v'hiktir hamizbecha. Right. Then you do the haktara of the imurim of the chalabim. Sorry. Um, and V'asat, right, and then this little piece at the end, which is going to Rashi is going to mention V'asala par kasher asala par chatat kenya asalo. So you do the same thing to this part as you did to the previous part. I think the part of the Kohen Mashiach that came up in the previous section. V'chiper lehem hakohen v'nislach lehem. So now we have the pasuk, right? V'chiper v'nislach. That was the pasuk that we saw darshaned right in this midrash halacha. So we're going to see the Rishonim kind of elucidating this and also referring us to different shitot that show up in the Gemara and in the Tannaim that might point us to in a couple of different directions about what really is going on with the shiurayim here. But let's just start with Rashi, who explains further explains a little bit what's going on in this Breita. So he's just elucidating what's happening with these with the words v'chiper and v'nislach, and then midrash v'chiper mikol makom. So it's a sort of expansive kapara that includes even if you didn't do smicha, right? Afal b'shalos machol, sorry, shalos amchol alavas kenim. Then v'nislach afal b'shalon natan shiraim. Liyasod mizbach achitzon, right? He's explaining what do we mean by natan shiraim? Pouring out the blood on, right? Putting the blood on the yisod of the mizbach achitzon. Delotema, and here's where Rashi tells you what's the hapnimiyot that's operating here. Delotema ho'ilu ktiva ba behedya kfela de ve'asaka asher asa. Right, we saw at the end of those psukim right here, I'm at the second to last line, ve'asala par in the white, asher asala par chatat kene aselo. Right, we have this the word ve'asa shows up a couple of times. Because the word ve'asa repeats itself, right? Nami alai hukai. I might think that it's also referring to these two actions, the smicha and the netina of the shiraim, and that they're also me'akiv, that they are also kind of integral parts of the process. Right? Then we know from the words v'chiper and v'nislach that they're actually not integral parts of the process. And then right explaining the part of the Breita, the part of the midrash halacha in which the midrash kind of wonders why hazaa is ma'akev whereas smicha and shiraim are not. So smicha lo ma'akevet ba'alma. What does that mean? Rashi says kedamrina perakama v'samach v'nirtzaki smicha ma'akevet. Okay, sure. Smicha in other cases is also not ma'akev the kapara. So Rashi says, what do we mean when we say in other places the shfichat shiraim is not ma'akiv? That when it comes to other chataot, right, chatat achitzona, right, all opinions agree that the shficha of the shiraim is not ma'akiv, and therefore we can assume from this Breita, right, that therefore this Breita can assume, or this midrash can assume that if we're kind of taking one thing out, something has to be not ma'akiv, so the shficha v'shiraim is going to be not ma'akiv. Tosafot here isn't going to disagree with Rashi, but is going to bring a couple of other things into the mix and clarify a little bit further. So, right, Tosafot on v'chiper here. Right, even though, right, right. So again, we're talking about the word the word v'chiper and v'samach coming to say that certain things aren't ma'akiv, right? Tosafot's just coming to say, whoa, we know that they're not ma'akiv in other cases. That's what we just said. Smicha and shficha of shiraim aren't ma'akiv in other places. Tosafot's saying we still might have thought that they were ma'akiv here. Why? Like Rashi said, mishum ve'asak asher asa alayukai. Right? I might have thought that asak asher asa was coming to tell us that those actions, when it comes to the chataot hapnimiyot, are ma'akiv. Umihu lahaktarari murim lo itzrich de lo makve b'shum makom. Phil's just also pointing out, wait a second, we have v'chiper, we have v'chiper and v'salchu, but or v'chiper and v'nislach, that come to tell us that the smicha and the shficha, the shiraim aren't ma'akiv, but we don't have anything to tell us that the haktara of the chalavim aren't ma'akiv. So what about that? He's saying no, there's no havamina even that they would be ma'akiv. Why? Because they're not ma'akiv anywhere. right? They happen after the whole process of the whole real process of the avoda is over. And because of that, right, like that, of course they're not gonna now retroactively passel the entire avoda process. The low dami smicha to have kodem avodat hadam, right? Whereas smicha, which happens first, right before any of the avodat hadam happens, of course we could say that it's ma'akev because, right, it might be a central part of, let's say, preparing this korban for the avodah process, and maybe it wouldn't have been rendered a korban in the first place. The shiraim nami, and but now what about shiraim? Shiraim happens after, right? The leftover blood. What's Tosafot going to say? No, no, no. Shiraim, there is a good havamina that it might be ma'akev. Why? Because shiraim nami avodat hadam ninu ma'akve lakama tonight. Right? Shiraim are actually they're part of the avodat hadam, and there are some Tannaim that actually think they're that they are ma'akev. So we're going to see who those Tannaim are and where Tosafot gets this from. In a moment. But right, just to point out here that the Tosfot is describing the shvicha, the shiraim as part of avodat hadam, right? It's not just some kind of something that you like a place to dump the leftovers. But okay, there's the sort of central part of what you do with the beginnings with the dam, nitinala mizbeach hazaa when it comes to chataot hapnimiyot. But right, that the shvicha al yesod mizbeach hachitzon is actually maybe according to Tosfot part of the avodah. Tosfot right in the next dibur matchil anu machshir kind of continues on and gives us even a further window into this. To the whole sorry, to the whole apachot chataot hachitzonot modu kulei alma d'shiraim lo. Right, again going back to this part of the Breita that says, wait, why say that these two actions aren't makiv whereas the other ones are? Oh, because they're not makiv in other places. Certainly with chataot chitzoniot, it's clear that everyone thinks that they're not makiv. Aval hazaot lo ashkechan b'chuma shelo yakfu. Obviously, hazaa is always makiv everywhere. Now, ulepirush Rabbeinu Tam. Tosfot brings in right Rabbeinu Tam shita katana de amar shiraim hachitzonim ma'akve. Well, Rabbeinu Tam thinks that there is a Tannaitic position. There is some Tana who thinks that even when it comes to right, that even when it comes to chataot chitzoniot, the shiraim actually are akiv. Right, Rashi just said everyone thinks that there is that there is not akiv. Tosfot also just said everyone thinks that there is not akiv, but no. Rabbeinu Tam thinks that when it comes to chataot chitzoniot, there is a shita in the Tannaim that actually shiraim are ma'akiv. Right, and if you think that, then kasher lahautana minalan lifsol b'hazot alachshir b'shiraim. Right, how would that Tana right take if our Tana wanted to basically take our midrash halacha and understand it, right? Why would I say right if I have a couple of words v'nislach if v'chiper and v'nislach, and I have to say that means that a couple of the actions aren't ma'akev. So according to the other shittot, it makes sense why these two actions specifically aren't ma'akev, shiraim and smicha. But because in other places they're also not ma'akev. But if you have a Tana who thinks that in other places shiraim are ma'akev, then why would I say that in this case shiraim would not be ma'akev, whereas haza'ah would? It doesn't make sense according to right Rabbeinu Tam saying according to this Tana. So the answer that Tosfot gives here is Shemalo Darish V'nislach. So actually, maybe that Tana doesn't darshan the word V'nislach. He only thinks that Smicha isn't Ma'akiv, and actually would think that Shiraim are Ma'akiv also in chataot hapnimiyot. Gonna skip the end of this Tosfot and move on, but right. What we see here is that Rabbeinu Tam thinks that there is a shita in the Tannaim, right, a position in the Tannaim that shiraim, whether it comes to chataot chitzoniot or chataot hapnimiyot, actually really do matter. So now we're gonna see actually that on the previous daf we can get maybe a window into where Rabbeinu Tam gets this and what this opinion in the Tannaim is. So yesterday's daf, little bit of chazara for you. At the bottom of Amud Bet of yesterday's daf. Rav Papa is right. Is dealing with the question of how do we know which kinds of blood spritz require kibus and which don't. So Amar Papa mina la titnan. So he's trying to get this from a Mishnah. Nitaz min hatzavar al habeged eno taun kibus min hakeren min hayesod eno taun kibus min min hara'ui la keren taun kibus. So right, the Mishnah itself says right, it's talking about spritzes of blood from minat savar al habeged. So while you're shechting the animal, some blood comes out and spritzes on the clothes, so that doesn't require kibus. Min hakeren min yesod also, ta'un kibus. Um, right, whether when the blood was already on the mizbeach, whether on the keren of the mizbeach or on the yisod of mizbeach, and then it gets on your clothes, also then doesn't require kibus. But min hara, right? So what when where Papa's darsh more or less darshaning from that, right? Darshaning isn't really the right word because it's a Mishnah, but what he's learning from this Mishnah, um, is that right? Sure, min hakeren min yesod. If it's already on the mizbeach, then it gets on your clothes. You don't require kibus. But min hara'ui keren, meaning anything that was in a position where it already could have been put on the mizbeach, which is to say, it was already in a klisha, right? It was right, like ready for hakrava, ready for the avodah. That blood gets on your clothes, then it is tawin kibus. So that's Rav Papa. Then wait, but then we're gonna ask on Rav Papa v'litamech min hayesodino toun kibus hamin haraoili so toun kibus. Right? You do the same reading of the Mishnah that way. Right? We said mina karen mina yesod doesn't require kibus. Then if it was ra'uila karen it would be toun kibus. So too if it were ra'uila yesod it would be toun kibus. What is ra'uila yesod? We're talking about leftover blood from when the blood was already when part of the blood was already put on the mizbeach, right? And now we have this leftover, these shirei hadam, which now have to go get spilled on the yesod of the mizbeach. So the stuff that's ra'ui yesod, then it should also be ta'un kibus. But wait a second, asher yizek ktiv, asher yizek, right? The blood that will be sprinkled, right? That's the blood that requires kibus. Karach l'zeh huzah, meaning it doesn't include any blood that right any blood from which we already did the sprinkling. So then the stuff that's ra'ui liyasod should not be ta'un kibus. Um, um, and then so the Gemara's response to this is right is ha mani Rabbi Nechemia. So no, actually our Mishnah is according to the Shita of Rabbi Nechemia. Right, our Mishnah, according to our Mishnah, we would think that minhai ra'ui liyasod also requires kibus. And right there, our Mishnah is Rabbi Nechemia. Ditnan, what does Rabbi Nechemia think? We know that Rabbi Nechemia has a position that says, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, shiurei hadam shigrivan b'chutz chaya, that shiraim of blood that you were makriv b'chutz, right outside of the azara, you're chayav on them for hakrava b'chutz, right? Any basically korban content that you're makriv b'chutz is a problem and you're chayav for it. So Rabbi Nechemia says that extends even to shiurei hadam, even to dam that you already did the haza'ah on, let's say, um, already put on the Kranota Mizbeach. So that blood is still kind of retains its korban status enough that if you were to be makriv b'chutz, you could chayev. So too here. Also, if it gets in your clothes, it's tawin kibus. It's still korban blood. That's the position of Rabbi Nechemia. And then, so right, going back to Tosafot, the position of Rabbeinu Tam. Going back to the Tosafot, the position of Rabbeinu Tam, it makes sense to think that Rabbeinu Tam, that right, this position of Rabbi Nechemia, that shirei hadam really have are retain their status as right dam avodah, dam of the right dam that is a korban, that you'd be chayav if you were makriv it b'chutz, that it right if it gets on your clothes are to'un kibus, and that presumably would be ma'akiv for the korban as well. So just quickly to this machloka between Tanakama. I'm not sure Tanakama isn't really the right word, but between the mainstream position, the mainstream Tanaitic position that is not Rabbi Nechemia. Right here, it's the Mishnah is just according to Rabbi Nechemia. But according to everybody else would be patur, and according to Rabbi Nechemia, right, if you're makriv b'chutz, the shira, right, if you take the shiraim of the blood and you sprinkle it or kind of do some other avodah with it outside, you're chayav for hakrava b'chutz, according to Rabbi Nechemia. So just according to kind of look at this distinction between Rabbi Nechemia and the mainstream shitat chachamim, shitat Tanakama, right, for Rabbi Nechemia, if you're chayav for sprinkling leftover blood outside, right, then what fundamentally what that means is sprinkling the leftover blood, right, the shiraim, it's part of the atonement procedure. Whereas for everybody else, if one is right patur for sprinkling leftover blood outside, what that means is that sprinkling leftover blood is not actually part of the avodah process itself, which then kind of begs the question: what is it? What is the role of the shficha of the leftover blood on the yesod? So just kind of to offer a like what I would sort of imagine is the kind of intuitive reading of this, right? If you think that the shiraim are not ma'akev, the kapara, right? The shiraim aren't ma'akev. If you're ma'akev them b'chutz, you're fine. If you get them on your clothes, they're not totem kibus, right? It's not really part of the avodah. So what are we doing when we are shofech the shiraim of the dam on the mizbeach? Honestly, we probably just kind of need to, right? This was blood that, let's say, could have ended up as part of the Netinar Haza'ah, the Mizbeach. Um, and right, it's we need somewhere dignified to put it. We need something to do with it that is fitting for right its status as blood that really was and on some level still is part of this korban. Whereas if you think that the Shiraim are ma'akev the kafara, right? If you're the Shita of Rabbi Nechemiah according to Rabbi Tam, or the Havamina according to the other Shitot in the Rishonim, um, right? If you think that the Shiraim really bear some kind of a central role in the kapara process, part of the avodah of the blood, right? That you do haza'ah, let's say, and then right that obviously only covers part of the blood, but that the rest of the blood, the avodah of the blood, is putting it on the yesod of the mizbeach. Um, and that's true even for chataot hapnimiyot, where there's haza'ah, let's say, right inside on the mizbach hapnimi, that actually the avodah that actually the putting of the blood on the mizbach hachitzon is also part of the avodah. So the chataot hapnimiyot maybe are it's a little bit of a misnomer, and that actually they're chataot of that are pnimi and chitzoni, right? That have a component of the avodah happens on the mizbach hapnimi, and a component of the avodah happens on the mizbach hachitzon. Um, and with that, I think that right that actually can dovetail nicely with a machloket parshanit on the psukim of around the chatat of Yom Kippurim, around what how to read a couple of the different words. There's a machloket between Rashi and Ibn Ezra, and I think um, this question of right is the avodah happening only on the mizbach hapnimi or kind of only inside the Ohel Moed, or is it also or is what's happening outside the shficha the shiraim, is that also kind of part of the process. So dovetails nicely with this machloket that we're gonna see very briefly to close out. Um, so the psukim on the right on in Parshat Acharei, which describe the avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Um, so right, he takes the shiur hachatat, and it tells us a couple of different things that he does with it, and Rashi and Ibn Ezra are gonna debate what precisely each of them refer to. So we've got Rav Shachat Tzir Chatat. So he takes the Tzir Chatat Shala'am, and what does he do? He's zauto ala kaporet v'lifnei kaporet. So this is inside the Kodesh Kodashim. He does one haza'ah achat lamala shev lamata on the kaporet v'lifnei kaporet. And then what does it say? V'chiper ala Kodesh mitamah. But that. And then what do we get? V'chin ya'aseh la'ohel moed hashochin itam. So then he does the same thing to the Ohel Moed, meaning the Kodesh, not the Kodesh Kodashim. So that's step two. And then step three, ויצא אל המזבח אשר לפני השם וכיפר עליו, ולקח מדם הפר מדם השעיר ונתן על כהן המזבח סביב. So that's just the first half of that pasuk, right? Because again, we're still talking about the seir, right? That the he leaves to the mizbeach asher lifnei Hashem. Let's look at which mizbeach this is referring to. V'chiper alav, and then right and sorry, and then he takes the both blood v'hizalav, right? He takes midam hapar midam hasi'ir v'natan al hamizbeach saviv v'hizalav minadam be'etzba'o sheva pamim. So he does another haza'ah there. So just quickly, we're going to say v'chein yaseh la'ohel moed, right? That was after you do what you do in the Kodesh Kodashim haza'ah there. Then v'chein yaseh la'ohel moed. So what does that mean? According to Rashi, kashim shehizam mishnehem bifnim achat lamala v'shev lamata, right? The same way that he took the par and the seir and sprinkled the blood there. Kach mazeh al haparochet mibachutz mishnehem achat lamala v'shev lamata. So now you take the blood both and do haza'ah on the parochet. Okay. What does Ibn Ezra say? So wait, whoa. Ibn Ezra says v'chein yaseh is actually referring to, right, he does the haza'ah actually two more times, both on the parochet and on the inner and on the mizbeach hapnimi, right? Whereas Rashi's also going to get the Mizbeach HaPnimi, but where is he going to get it from? He's going to get the Mizbeach HaPnimi from V'yatzal Mizbeach Asher Lifnei Hashem. Right? Rashi said, right? Rashi says, what does that mean? Mizbeach Asher Lifnei Hashem. What's it referring to? Rashi says the Mizbeach has a half Shu Lifnei Hashem Bayicha. But the Mizbeach that is Lifnei Hashem is referring to the inner Mizbeach. Whereas Ibn Ezra says, no, no, no. Hu Mizbeach Olat. That's the Mizbeach HaChitzon that's outside. Rashi then has to deal with what the word v'yatzah doing, right? Because if he was just in the Ohel Moed, sprinkling the Bal Kabor, and then he leaves, he was in the Heichal, and then he leaves to the Mizbeach that is inside. Where's he leaving to? Ma'atam Lomar v'yatzah. So Rashi just has to deal with that little problem. Lifnei shehizah hazoved ala paruchet ba'amad min hamizbeach v'lifnim v'hizah uvematnot hamizbeach hiskikol atzeit min hamizbeach v'lachutz v'yatchil mekar mizrachit tzfonit. So basically he has to go further out in an outward direction so that he can start on the correct corner, which is actually kind of further out. It's a solution to a problem on some level. Whereas with Ibn Ezra, the word v'yatzah makes more sense in context. On the other hand, right, the mizbeach that's lifnei Hashem on for Rashi, right, that maybe that works a little better with pshat, but just to but where do we end up with all of this? What does Ibn Ezra say? Ibn Ezra says that right part of the avodah of Yom Kippurim includes has right the right includes avodah on the mizbach haolah, the mizbach chitzon. It's outside, um, and right on some level we can see almost kind of echoes of the shita of Rabbi Nehemiah maybe or of the Hava, I mean in the Breita um, that even for these chataot, right, even for this chatat pnimi, right, there's an element of the kapara process that also extends right to what happened, right? That it extends to what happens on the Mizbeach HaChitzon. Whereas for Rashi, whatever happens on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, that's not a central part of, um, right, part of the Avodah of Yom Kippur, part of the Avodah of Chatat, one of the chataot pnimiyot. So again, maybe two different really understandings of what the role of this leftover blood is. Um, right? Is it part of the kapara process itself, or is it just a kind of dignified way of disposing of our leftovers? And hopefully that'll give us kind of what to think about in terms of um what the role of the leftovers are, not only in korbanot, but what in our avodat Hashem more broadly, right? Um the pieces that are left over, are they a kind of um right like side gig that isn't really important, and then maybe right things that are left over from we have to get rid of in a dignified way, or actually maybe we can incorporate that on some level into our avodat Hashem more broadly. So thank you so much, and see you next week.